So perhaps before we start our conversation, Andres, we can just introduce ourselves to everyone here. Do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. Everybody, I'm Andres Tombé from Colombia. I'm indigenous community that is Misaj. So it's amazing to hear here and share about my work that is in my community and other indigenous community in Colombia. Yeah.
Great. Well, it's great to meet you, Andres. And my name is James Leslie. I work for the United Nations Development Program. I am based in Panama, but recently was living in Peru for 16 years and working with indigenous and local communities as well as with farmers and farmer organizations. And so I'm very excited here to talk with Andres and learn about his experience.
Okay, perfect.
So Andres, perhaps we can start with you. If you could share a bit about your experience working with the communities, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities that you have seen working with the communities.
Perfect. First, I short about the project. My project's name is Territorial Food and Life. So we work with the children's, young peoples, and adult peoples, and elderly people. So it's an international project. We try to maybe improve the indigenous system foods. Is our main objective. So we have the different strategies to improve the indigenous system food. The first one maybe is the ancestral children cooks, that maybe children's around 8 and 10 years old prepare the food, but we combine maybe the outdoors cooks and ancestral cooks peoples. So these children try to recover the ancestral place. They ask maybe the grandfathers, grandmothers about what food they maybe remember eat in the past, no? So before or after, they try to prepare this place in our school. So it's a good strategy because we want to recover our ancestral place. Second, maybe we try to produce the organic food. So we try to, first one, well, in my territory, the land, the soils is intensively used. So we want to recover the soils. Maybe so we can recover, and maybe we are in harmony with the nature, with our cosmogony. So we need to recover the maybe soil health. Third one, we help with the women entrepreneurships and maybe the women autonomy economy, because maybe a lot of women don't have the economic autonomy. So we help this one. So according to this one, we find the different challenge and opportunity that we can continue improving in our community. So to give the answer about the first one, which challenges we have in these projects. The first one may be that policies are not according to community necessities. So we need to balance with the community necessities, because community demanded is different than the politician's perspective, and it's different. So in this project, we want to generate dialogue with the community, politicians, and other institutions that we have in our territory. So that thing is a challenge, but we tried because also maybe the community projects is long visions, but the politician is only maybe short vision because maybe the mandatos.
Their periods of implementation.
The periods of the politician is maybe for 4 years, so it changes very fast. So we want to create a sustainable projects, but very long terms. Also, maybe the climate change is a challenge because ancestrality, a white community, for example, in August, seeds the maize,
corn.
The corn in August seeds the corns because in September arrives the rains, but currently with the climate change don't happen. So it's very difficult because the community lost the crops, so don't have to eat or food to eat in the rest of the years. So I think it's very problematic, these aspects, and also affect the historical practice like special moments because the community don't have the food to celebrate this moment because the climate change everything. So I think the main principle, main problematics or challenge that the community have.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perhaps if I could highlight some of the key elements of what you just shared. So you've talked about the importance of valuing the community knowledge, the ancestral knowledge, and putting that knowledge to use in terms of sharing it with the new generations, and having that also feed into the work you do to protect the soils and protect the food crops. I've also heard that you've talked about the challenge in terms of engaging in policy making and having that discussion with government and politicians who are usually much more thinking about a short-term plan while the community is thinking strategically long-term. And you've also talked about the challenge related to climate change and how that's already impacting the food crops. Perhaps I can share a little bit about an experience in Peru, and then I'll see if any of that resonates with you. In Peru, for the last more than 10 years, UNDP was partnering with indigenous communities located up in the northern part of the Amazon, close to the border with Ecuador, not too far from Colombia, but it's a big country. And we were working with these communities on incorporating ecosystem-based adaptation and community-based adaptation practices into their livelihoods, particularly related to agriculture, production of cocoa, the harvesting of natural latex or rubber, the production of food crops for local consumption, fisheries, etc. And what we found was that this was successful in also incorporating all of the traditional and ancestral knowledge from the communities into the work. We found that to be successful at a very small scale, with the 15 or 20 communities that we were initially working with. But the challenge was how do we help these communities to share these good practices at a larger landscape level or with other communities in other parts of the country. So that is where we started to work on creating a space and strengthening a space at the landscape level where the communities could come and sit at the table with the local government, with the national government representatives, with other civil society partners, and together they could start to make decisions about how to channel support to the communities. And an important aspect of this was that the communities had a clear vision of how they wanted to pursue sustainable development for their communities. In Peru, these plans are called life plans or planes de vida. So these communities with their life plans had a very clear idea, they have a clear idea of how they want to develop, and yet they are looking for partners to support efforts, but always ensuring that the communities are strengthened and are empowered to make those decisions about the development. So what we did was we basically supported them in creating that space for the different stakeholders to come to the table, so that then government could see these good practices taking place in the initial 10 or 15 communities and say, okay, we have money and we can start to support you and also begin to implement these activities with public money, government money, in other communities. So the impact began to expand across the landscape thanks to this collaboration that we were able to support. So I before I continue, I want to ask you, do you have these types of collaboration mechanisms with the government, with other partners, perhaps at the landscape level or with the communities? If so, how are they working? If you do not have them, do you think that could be something that could strengthen the work that you're doing and expand it upon it?
Okay, it's a good question because we have a co-creation teams. That the co-creation team is a group when, like a project, we select important elderly people in my community, women and men. So these people have an influence externally of community. So this helps to decide the community necessity and maybe dialogue with the governments. So it's a good strategy because they have a community necessities, but also dialogue with the government. So we maybe improve our strategy. So also we combine the indigenous knowledge with the academic knowledge, because I think it's very important to combine this knowledge. As not different, maybe because both knowledge is important to combine, because maybe academic give ideas, but the indigenous also give ideas to maybe resolve the different challenges that have like a human. For example, in the climate change, the ancestral indigenous have a lot of strategies that maybe have to adapt to climate change. For example, the crop rotations, soils conservations, and the biodiversity, indigenous biodiversity is very high. So they have our genetic conservation is we find in the communities. So according to this one, we need to have dialogue governments, communities. So I think it's a big opportunity to continue. So I think it's Yeah, I think this. I'm not sure.
Yes, no, I think that's helpful. And where do you see the opportunity for through that dialogue with government and the universities, where do you see the opportunity then to perhaps share your experience and your knowledge with other communities in Colombia so that they can also learn from you?
Well, it's we find opportunities because, for example, currently in Colombia, there are indigenous universities. So in this space, is possible to revalue the indigenous knowledge and maybe share with other spaces. So according to this one, we create this space so the maybe academic or a professor of the university is similar with the elderly people that have a lot of knowledge that's as very important. So for example, I work with the potatoes a lot. I love the potatoes, so I work to recover the maybe biological characteristics of the potatoes, but also the knowledge that is ancestral of the community. For example, in the Misag cosmovision, we have the duality that is the maybe cold potatoes and wild potatoes. So maybe so in any moment when people have the fever, don't recommend to eat the cold potato. So we need to have balance in your body. So we need to eat the warm potato, cold potatoes. I'm sorry, caliente y frío. So it's caliente is warm.
It's warm, yeah.
So frío, cold.
Yes.
So when people have the fever, it's recommend to eat cold potatoes because you need to have the balance in your body and maybe spiritually. So yeah, so in this context, it's important to recover the indigenous knowledge, but complement with the academic or scientific knowledge.
And talking about potatoes and the importance of the agro biodiversity, it reminds me also of what I consider to be an innovation when I was working in Peru, was that the communities also were very active conserving the agro biodiversity, the genetic biodiversity associated with food. In Peru, and probably similar in Colombia, there are thousands of varieties of potato. And what the government did, or the state did, was recognize the importance of the role of the communities in conserving this genetic diversity. And an instrument was created, a legal instrument was created to establish agro-biodiversity. They're called, the literal translation is agro-biodiversity zones, but it's a type of protected area now in Peru, recognizing where this agro-biodiversity originates from, where it is being conserved, and particularly the role of the communities in conserving this agro-biodiversity in the context of climate change and in the context of biodiversity loss. And so that's an opportunity where the communities are being recognized for their role as stewards of this agro-biodiversity, and they're receiving that legal recognition that then in the context of the Convention on Biodiversity, Biological Diversity, the CBD, and in the context of the Global Biodiversity Framework, we're here talking about climate, but they're very much connected, the GBF and the Paris Accord. in the context of the global biodiversity framework, countries are committing to conserve 30% of their land, 30% of their oceans by 2030. And an important part of that conservation is going to take place thanks to the role and the stewardship led by the communities around agrobiodiversity and other areas of importance. So I wonder if in Colombia there is a similar instrument, a legal instrument, that recognizes the role of the communities in the conservation of the agricultural biodiversity, the agrobiodiversity that you've mentioned.
Well, with maybe the currently government, that is Petro, there exist these instruments. For example, now we with the government, we want to build a biotechnology laboratory in the indigenous community, because maybe the native seeds is part of the indigenous, or there are indigenous seeds, is not the external people or the organizations, is part of the indigenous. So it's important that indigenous community preserve and maintain this diversity, because it's a complicated, because lost a lot. So according to this one, the government have interest that community maintain and maybe preserve this diversity but also create a good seeds. So currently we have this project. But also maybe in Colombia exists the Centro Internacional de el CIAT.
Centro Internacional de Agricultura Tropical. So Tropical Agriculture Center, the International Tropical Agriculture Center.
Yeah, so in this institution have a lot of seeds that lost in the community. So currently this institution returned to the community the seeds lost. So I think it's a important, important to community recover these seeds that lost.
So there you're talking about already the role of the communities in conserving the genetic diversity, the seeds, and also the partnerships that you have that have supported that. So you have partnerships with organizations like CIAT, the government is also supporting, and I'm sure there's potentially a need for more collaboration in order to strengthen that conservation activity and that work that you're doing with the communities.
Yeah, it's important, but maybe there are also other challenges with this, because it's only recover the seeds. It's important they maybe increase the native seeds consumption for the people and the community. So in this context, for example, now I have 18 native potatoes in my space, or huerta.
In your garden.
In my garden, so it's a lot, but some potatoes maybe don't exist in the farmers. So we want to increase and create maybe young entrepreneurships when maybe we can offer the ancestral place, because we need to create demand of these seeds. Yeah, so I think it's important to increase the consumption of native seeds.
And they're increasing the consumption. You're also contributing to healthy diets, healthy people. So it's all really connected. Addressing climate change, addressing biodiversity loss, having a healthy community.
Yeah.
And so we have a lot to learn from those experiences. I think we're out of time. or maybe we have a minute, but it's been great talking with you. We actually took the conversation in places that I didn't expect, we didn't plan on. So it's been a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, and excuse for my English, but I.
No, it's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you, everyone.